And I'm sorry to interrupt you. New York Attorney General Letitia James has been indicted. Andrew Weissman, your reaction?
I think that I want to sort of address the people who might look at this and say this is sort of tit for tat, that you see that in the Democratic administration, you see them going after Republicans, and this is Republicans going after Democrats. This is where, one, even if two wrongs don't make a right, even if that were true, but this is where facts matter. In the Letitia James case that she brought in New York, there was a trial. Facts were adduced. We all could look at those facts, and Donald Trump had a chance, an opportunity to have due process and to hear all of that. Here, the process by which this has been undertaken, like the process that was undertaken with respect to James Comey, tells you that career people and even Trump-appointed people did not think that there was evidence. There were not facts that justified this. And I think a perfect symbol of the fact that this is different, that what we're seeing is different. It is not normal. It is not everyone does it, is to take a look at Abbe Lowell. Abbe Lowell is the defense lawyer for Letitia James. He was also the defense lawyer for Hunter Biden. In the Biden administration, the Department of Justice actually charged and convicted the sitting president's son. And Abbe Lowell represented him and defended him and lost at trial.
Yeah.
And he is now defending Letitia James. And to me, when people say it's tit for tat, it's like, no, in prior administrations, and by the way, Republican and Democratic administrations under normal times, which I agree with Mark are gone, under normal times in those administrations, there is no politics that is supposed to be considered. I'm not saying it's never considered, and there aren't those aberrations.
No,
that's not how you're built.
Right. Andrew, let me bring Carol Leonnig back in. Carol Leonnig broke the news today exclusively that a grand jury was hearing evidence against Tish James. We have now heard the news that New York Attorney General Letitia James has been indicted. Carol Leonnig.
Yeah, a few minutes ago, we confirmed that she was indicted by a grand jury in Alexandria of at least one count of bank fraud, Nicole, and the return was rather speedy. 4 o'clock was when the grand jury was supposed to come back out and present their information to Halligan. There was a four-person in the courtroom along with Halligan, and they released their decision. I will tell you there's one other really interesting element to this that I'm hearing from sources, which is that this grand jury made its decision and listened to the presentation on its very first day in the box. In other words, grand juries sit sometimes for weeks and weeks. This grand jury was impaneled today, and this was their first case and their first decision.
Carol, any reaction from any of the resigned or fired U.S. attorneys in the Virginia offices that had looked at these cases and been pressured before Lindsay Halligan's appointment to bring them and refused?
Well, in the 10 minutes since I was last with you and the 10 minutes before we were reporting, I have not spoken with some of those folks, but I can tell you from previous conversations that they were bracing for this. Letitia James herself, I understand from sources, was fully expecting that she would be indicted. Again, keeping in mind that the standard for indicting someone is the probability that there may be a crime that was committed. And it's a very low standard, but she was expecting this and bracing for it herself. Prosecutors in the Eastern District of Virginia Some of them driven out by their decision not to bring this case, some of them resigning in disgust about other cases that Donald Trump is pressing and insisting upon. He wants to get to all the hits in his enemies list. Those people have been really tortured about all of this, because for them, not only is this not a righteous case, not only is this not a justified case, but for them, it does not even meet the bare minimum for the evidence that has to be presented at trial to sustain a conviction.
Carol, just talk a little bit about the legacy of this office. This is an office that, other than SDNY, I believe, brings the bulk of terrorism and national security cases. It has a regardless of whether the person who's president is a Democratic politician or Republican politician, this office is pretty storied. It is now forever tainted as the office that Trump's handpicked, underqualified prosecutors bring political prosecutions.
This office had a lot of respect among U.S. attorneys' offices in the country for exactly the reason that in the wake of 9/11, it became the home of very thorough, rigorous, and relentless terror prosecutions. It became the home of moving quickly and speedily, but also focusing on the toughest cases, the ones that protect national security, both from international terrorism, from domestic terrorism. It became this place often described as the rocket docket, because there was no flinching, no waiting. You know, prosecutors had a joke of, look, I go to the defense and I say, we're going to indict you on Monday if you don't come in and plead. And Friday passes and they indict on Monday. It had a very unflinching quality about it. But it is part of the behemoth of the Department of Justice. And I think it's so important that you focus on this, Nicole, the legacy. The Department of Justice's manual for prosecutors, its advice to them is, do not bring a case out of pettiness. Do not bring a case out of political or partisan goals. Do not bring a case because you feel some animus to this individual. Bring a case after you rigorously assess the facts, are sure that they are solid and true, and believe that this is in the public interest to bring this case. You know, there is a joke now going around in Washington, D.C., that if Letitia James can be charged with bank fraud, pretty much anybody could, because we fill out financial forms all the time where someone checks the wrong box. We don't know all the facts in Letitia James's case, but the ones we have in front of us, certainly, and the ones that prosecutors in this office assessed multiple times, did not seem like a very strong or righteous case.
Well, and Carol, to your point, we don't have all the facts, but Trump's own appointees inside the Department of Justice did. And until Lindsay Halligan got there, Trump's own political appointees to these offices didn't believe there was a case against Letitia James.
That's right. And my understanding is that Attorney General Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, while certainly very fierce supporters of the president, privately had concerns about this case, privately understood where Eric Siebert was coming from and wanted to try to keep that U.S. attorney in place, and understood his reservations.
Director Brennan, let me bring you in on this, and let me try to sort of honor Mark Elias's note about anchoring the news in the moment in which we are, not in the moment we remember being. You're on this list. Is your life different knowing that without any facts, with Trump being there an entire first term, raging against you and carrying out the revenge he could? I think he took your security clearances away by 2017 or 18, that this isn't a moment where our country is led by a party in the White House, at the Department of Justice, or in Congress, or in the media, which is, I think, where Andrew's note about tit for tat being out there, and I appreciate nipping disinformation in the bud as much as anyone, but there isn't a two sides frame that you can put this story in. MAGA Republicans refuse to indict Jim Comey. MAGA Republicans refuse to indict Tish James. Today, Jim Comey has been arraigned, and 40 minutes ago, Tish James was indicted. Where are we?
Well, Nicole, I think this is just one feature that we have seen over the last 9 months in terms of the collapse of the America that we knew. When I look at the footage of ICE raids throughout the country, the deployment of U.S. military, the actions against law firms, universities, other types of organizations that Donald Trump doesn't like, and then going after his critics. I agree with Mark when he said that Donald Trump probably doesn't care. He probably would like people to get convicted, but he knows he can't control that. What he would like, though, is to have the word indicted next to individuals' names. And he knows that he has a Department of Justice that he can exploit and manipulate, and he has an Attorney General who's willing to do the bidding. I'm old enough to remember the days of Watergate, when we had an Attorney General, Elliot Richardson, and a deputy, Bill Ruckelshaus, who resigned rather than do what President Nixon wanted to do. We are not in that era anymore. We don't have individuals who are willing to stand up to what clearly is an autocratic, authoritarian effort on the part of the Trump administration. Not just Trump, it's the Stephen Millers and others who are very mean-spirited, very, vengeful, very, very nasty in many respects, trying to hurt and damage people across the board, whether or not you're an undocumented individual who's been here for 30 years and has, raised a family and has a job, or you're a former national security professional who's worked over 3 decades to try to keep this country safe. If you're not on the Trump team, then you are potentially a target. And I think, as Carol mentioned, the way that they're going out now and trolling and looking for ways to be able to indict people or bring charges against people really is something that should worry every American. And the fact that the Republicans in Congress are allowing this to happen, that I find is the most appalling part. Until they grow some, in Congress and really say enough is enough, I think we're going to continue to see these abuses of power, which is what it is.
When you look at the Comey indictment, the news tonight on the James indictment, and the use of the DOJ, where you were a prosecutor, in this manner, and we can show some of the assorted faces, what is your view of what's happening?
Well, I think what we're seeing is authoritarianism and tyranny that we're now under, and the disintegration of the rule of law under Pam Bondi's stewardship and her fealty to the president as opposed to her oath of office.
That's a strong word. So you think it's very clear that the Attorney General knows what's going on, knows it to effectively be wrong, and is in a sense violating her oath to the Constitution?
Well, let's parse that out. Her testimony was that there would be no enemies list at the Justice Department. Clearly there is. Does she know what's going on? She was directly ordered by the president to bring these charges. Did she appoint Lindsay Halligan to be the U.S. attorney, even though she was unqualified and the appointment was illegal? Yes. So my answer to all your questions is absolutely.
You mentioned the Halligan appointment. That's something we've covered. This is the newly installed, inexperienced U.S. attorney bringing both the cases, James and Comey. Do you think that could be a problem for those cases? Do you think she is not legally, validly serving in that post right now, effectively bringing her prosecutions into question?
I do believe that to be the case. There's only one opinion on this issue issued thus far in the existence of Section 546, and that was written by Justice Alito when he was Assistant Attorney General in 1986. That makes it very clear that after serving 120 days, only the district court has the authority to appoint a new U.S. attorney, and that didn't happen here.
When you were working at the Trump White House, you, of course, were there during a period where the Comey history and other clashes were paramount. What do you think of this indictment of Comey on the merits? And what, if anything, might you tell us about that period of time? Because there was such a high-end clash. It was almost perhaps one of Donald Trump's first big clashes over who was in charge and whether the rules would hold.
My involvement in the Comey events at the White House is not something I'm ethically allowed to discuss, but I think, Comey, as we all know now, has many detractors. He's controversial. But this indictment is so unworthy of the Justice Department, as we've known it in the past, as trying to be even-handed and put no person above the law, and not to exercise retaliation. Keep in mind that seasoned, experienced federal prosecutors concluded there was insufficient evidence to indict Comey. He was the lead prosecutor in that regard, was fired, according to Trump, resigned according to him, but he's gone, and the reason he's gone is because he didn't bring the indictment against Comey. He was replaced by a Trump loyalist and personal attorney who promptly did bring an indictment against Comey without the support of her office, and in fact, her support there is so weak that she had to go a couple of 100 miles just to find attorneys within the Department of Justice who could choke down the humiliation of trying to represent the United States in this farcical prosecution.
When you look at this second term, Donald Trump, how does it contrast, if at all, from the president you served and either him or the structure and the administration around him in the first term?
Well, I think in terms of the structure, you had people of character in the White House. General Kelly, certainly, in the cabinet, General Mattis, Nikki Haley, Steve Mnuchin. There were a lot of senior people, smart people, people who loved the country, and were there for their independent judgment and to try to help the president understand where the guardrails were and what the lanes were. That doesn't exist now. I think, this term, the president feels unleashed. It clearly is his belief that he's entitled to do whatever it is he wants. And once he decides what he wants, the only issue is how quickly can you do this for me? Pam Bondi delivered Comey and now has delivered James. Hopefully America will understand that that's not really what the country was supposed to be about. It shouldn't be what it's about, and ideally it's something that people will rise up and unite and push back on.
Well, you're clearly using your voice and your experience to do that. What would you say to the people who still work inside either the White House, which is one thing, or agencies in the DOJ where they do take an oath to uphold the Constitution? They are not supposed to and are not empowered to do things in DOJ or the military, particularly that affect people's liberty and life, that are contrary to their oath and the law.
So I'm not really qualified to give advice to the federal employees writ large, but I will say that in my experience, most of the people serving the government are there because they enjoy the service. They enjoy performing their duties and honoring their oath. They enjoy helping people and trying to make the government work in a way that promotes America as a whole. I think it's very difficult for them to try to break ranks or resign. I think those are all, major life decisions that nobody should be telling them to do. They can only make that decision with their own conscience. And, of course, everybody that leaves the government or puts themselves in a position to be fired, weakens the government because they're not going to be replaced by competent people. They're going to be replaced by loyalists and tools. Yeah.
And as you say, that's something that people who take this seriously have to balance. I want to turn to the wider questions of the rule of law and the military powers that Donald Trump is trying to seize or expand. This was an exchange that got a lot of notice. It was posed as a question by a reporter, but it has since been reflected in other reporting as something that perhaps is being mulled inside the White House. Take a look.
Are you planning to invoke the Insurrection Act?
Well, it's been invoked before, as you know. If you look at Chicago, Chicago's a great city where there's a lot of crime. And if the governor can't do the job, we'll do the job.
The Insurrection Act, is that going to be formally invoked? Is that a way to kind of get around all this opposition?
Well, it is a way to get around it. If we don't have to use it, I wouldn't use it. If you take a look at what's been going on in Portland, it's been going on for a long time, and that's insurrection. I mean, that's pure insurrection.
Your view of the legality of that and whether, based on your knowledge, you think this White House is serious about getting to that point?
Oh, I think the White House is very serious about using any lever of government that inflates Trump's sense of his power and allows him to assert the level of control that he and his team want to assert in America. So yes, I think he is likely to invoke that at some point. And sadly, there is very little law or analysis that would restrain him if he chose to do so. The act is written in a way that both sides have known for years is a little bit reckless. Attempts to remedy the act have not gone very far in Congress, although there have been a few, and a few recently. It's an act that clearly does need to be revised, but I think he'll invoke it, and if he needs it, if he does, it will be difficult to stop his occupation of America and the encouragement that he gave generals recently to start practicing their soldiering in American cities against Americans.
So what does that look like? You view what you just referenced and the early sort of military deployments and skirmishes as a deliberate blueprint for what? Where would that go under the president?
That's an excellent question. I think many commentators have suggested that it may go toward his ultimate desire, perhaps not in 2026, but in 2028, to ensure that power passes to his chosen successor as opposed to the free and fair elections that we've been treated to throughout history.
Yeah, so you view it as a legitimate concern, not a movie nightmare scenario, that these current skirmishes would be building up to more widespread use of the military to distort or subvert the 2028 election and transfer of power if he were to lose, if the Republican Party were to lose?
I think just because it's a nightmare, which it is, as we're enduring now, doesn't make it not legitimate. I think it is something that people need to be vigilant about and question throughout. I don't think anybody ever anticipated the rule of law would disintegrate as rapidly as it has under Trump and Bondi. I think we're suffering now because of that, now that we have an enemies list in the Justice Department, despite Pam Bondi's assurance to Congress when she was being confirmed, and now that she's executing it on behalf of the president. So yes, I'm very concerned. I think people should be concerned.
Understood. I think people are listening. There's a host of cases where Donald Trump has been losing in the lower courts and would be normally on track to lose in the Supreme Court because he's not following the rule of law where, as you well know, and you've worked on this, lawyers will tell the president, well, the Constitution forbids that. So writing an executive order flatly against it isn't going to work. You don't get to rewrite the Constitution that way. You're going to lose. It's going to take energy and resources. Here it's the opposite. We've heard about flooding the zone and the other things. The birthright citizenship case is one example. Federal appeals court ruled the president cannot end that because it's in the Constitution. The Fifth Court since June blocking those types of orders. And yet he plows ahead. Can you help us understand that, having worked around for him and around him, and what do you see heading towards the Supreme Court, at least on those cases that seem fairly clear?
So I'm not sure my personal experience assists much more than just the obvious facts there, which is birthright citizenship is guaranteed to anybody born in the United States.
It's worth noting James Comey's son-in-law, who is, I believe, married to Maureen Comey, his daughter, who was fired from the Southern District of New York, I do believe, is where she served. His son-in-law used to work in the Eastern District of Virginia office up until they indicted his father-in-law, and he resigned in defense of the Constitution. And so I think Mark's point about, look, this is not business as usual. This isn't even politics as usual. The president is weaponizing fear, and fear has become policy. Intimidation has become policy. The only reason Tish James, James Comey, John Brennan, all of these folks are on Donald Trump's list is because at one point they all stood up to him in a different way. Donald Trump was doing illegal stuff in New York, lying about his square footage of his dang on apartment, and we can all see. Tish James investigated that for the people of New York. James Comey did not do what Donald Trump wanted him to do when he was FBI director. He didn't look the other way. He wouldn't go after Hillary Clinton, even though one could argue he went after Hillary Clinton. That's how Donald Trump is on the White House.
No kidding. We could do a whole episode on that.
He already did you a favor. I'm being tongue-in-cheek, but literally, all of these folks, Adam Schiff, now a sitting United States Senator, he is an individual who literally served as one of the impeachment lawyers in one of the representatives in the impeachment of Donald Trump in his first term. One of the impeachments. He was impeached twice. So I say that to say that the people that he is going after, even in New York, even in Chicago, the folks in Chicago and Illinois, they're standing up to the president. And so now they're in his crosshairs. And I just think that if anyone thinks that this is the climate that you will be safe, you're not. You cannot, silence is not going to protect you here. I think we all have to be just as loud and defiant and unbowed as the people in the streets of Chicago the other night, or Tish James in that video.
No, I agree. How do you, I guess for me, at least, I kind of look at some of this and I find it somewhat ironic that at the fact that right now you're the president and his Justice Department going after Tish James because of mortgage fraud. Well, headlines seem to indicate he should be looking within his own camp because right now, Bloomberg headline, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, like Fed Governor, made contradictory mortgage pledges. Oh, AP headline, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, a Senate hopeful, claimed 3 homes as his primary residence. ProPublica headline, Trump is accusing foes with multiple mortgages of fraud. Records show 3 of his cabinet members have the same problem. This is the reality.
And this is proof of selective prosecution.
And this is proof of...
Come on, lawyer us up, Catherine Christian.
No, go ahead. That's exactly right.
That's part of the evidence that Mr. Comey and now AG James will use, along with all of the public statements that President Trump has made, his social media posts directing Pam, also known as the Attorney General of the United States, to go after these people because of payback. That's basically what it is. It's payback. And what's frightening is it's a way of chilling people from standing up because it'll be, oh, no, look what happened to these people. I can't afford to be indicted because I can't afford a lawyer. So that's also why it's so frightening what's happening.
It's also frightening because fundamentally what you need is system reform. I'm sure you've seen that Senator Blumenthal, Representative Goldman have put together this sort of architecture for legislation that would up the ante on grand juries, would force line prosecutors to sign their names and say, I actually believe that I can secure a conviction on this, which is difficult when right now Lindsay Halligan is the only one who's willing to sign her name on any of these pieces of paper. But we're not there because there are not enough Republicans who are going to join in that effort to fundamentally reform the system in this moment of desperate need for our democracy. And so instead, we're left to what? Talk about what is the best defense for James Comey and Letitia James. I mean, that it feels so small, but in some ways, it is the only way we get out of this current timeline and into a new one.
Yeah, so I think 3 things. I mean, I think number one, John Heilemann made an excellent point earlier today on MSNBC, in which he said we need to start talking about the Republicans, not that there are insufficient number of Republicans to do the right thing. We should just start with the proposition and the assumption that there are no Republicans to ever do the right thing. Like, it has been 10 years since Republicans have done the right thing in Congress. And so the news is not that they are not willing to. The news will be if they are willing to, because they're not. The second thing is it is good to see these legislative efforts. You know, I've written about this. I've spoken about this. We don't need a resistance. We need a new opposition movement. And that opposition movement is going to take years. Like, this is not going to get restored overnight. This is going to take years. And today, those things are not possible.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. New York Attorney General Letitia James has been indicted by Donald Trump's Department of Justice on 1 count of bank fraud and 1 count of false statements to a financial institution. Now, this is one of those situations where basically everyone in the political world, anyone who's watching the news develop, saw this coming. And the reason is that the President of the United States explicitly in writing directed the Attorney General to indict his political opponents on obviously trumped-up charges. 19 days ago, Donald Trump posted this message on social media, quote, Pam, I have reviewed over 30 statements and posts saying that essentially same old story as last time, all talk, no action. Nothing is being done. What about Comey, Adam Shifty Schiff, Letitia? They're all guilty as hell, but nothing is being done, adding, quote, we can't delay any longer. It's killing our reputation and credibility. They impeached me twice and indicted me 5 times over nothing. Justice must be served now, President DJT. At the time, given how brazen that was, there was speculation that it must have been meant as a private directive to his AG to go after his enemies using the full tools of the Department of Justice. Well, now we know it was. According to the Wall Street Journal, quote, Trump meant to send a private message to Attorney General Pam Bondi urging her to prosecute former FBI Director James Comey and his other favored targets, according to U.S. officials familiar with the matter. Trump believed he had sent Bondi the message directly, addressing it to Pam, and was surprised to learn it was public, the official said. Public or private, the message was received. Trump's U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, that man there, a guy named Eric Siebert, was pushed out. Trump publicly called for him to leave because he did not believe there was sufficient evidence to charge Letitia James or James Comey. We've got reporting that there were even memos written to that effect by line attorneys. And then Siebert was promptly replaced by Trump's former personal attorney, Lindsay Halligan, who had 0 previous experience as a prosecutor, never even tried a case. Now, it is not even clear if Halligan was legally appointed to the job she now putatively occupies in the first place. But she did get to work anyway and immediately indicted Comey, who was arraigned yesterday. And now today, Tish James. A sitting president doing this out in the open would have, I believe, ended the career of any president not named Trump. It's the biggest justice scandal we've seen in our lifetime. He is directly ordering the pretextual prosecutions of political critics, of people he doesn't like, in a ham-fisted, retaliatory, lawless fashion that violates the laws of the country, the letter of the Constitution, and the spirit of liberty. Putting your political opponents in jail because they are your opponents, not because of what they did, is the heart of tyranny. It is an obviously impeachable offense. If there is any silver lining here, it is that the targets of Trump's ire and the retribution from a government he deigns to control are not going quietly. Much like James Comey before her, Letitia James has released a video statement stating in no uncertain terms these are baseless charges as retaliation for James's office suing the Trump Organization.
This is nothing more than a continuation of the president's desperate weaponization of our justice system. He is forcing federal law enforcement agencies to do his bidding, all because I did my job as the New York State Attorney General. These charges are baseless, and the president's own public statements make clear that his only goal is political retribution at any cost. The president's actions are a grave violation of our constitutional order and have drawn sharp criticism from members of both parties. His decision to fire a United States attorney who refused to bring charges against me and replace them with someone who is blindly loyal not to the law, but to the president, is antithetical to the bedrock principles of our country. This is the time for leaders on both sides of the aisle to speak out against this blatant perversion of our system of justice. I stand strongly behind my office's litigation against the Trump Organization. We conducted a 2-year investigation based on the facts and evidence, not politics. Judges have upheld the trial court's finding that Donald Trump, his company, and his 2 sons are liable for fraud. I'm a proud woman of faith, and I know that faith and fear cannot share the same space. And so today, I'm not fearful. I'm fearless. And as my faith teaches me, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. We will fight these baseless charges aggressively, and my office will continue to fiercely protect New Yorkers and their rights. And I will continue to do my job.
It's been less than 3 weeks since Trump made that post calling for Comey, James, and Senator Adam Schiff of California to be indicted. And here we are. He's already gotten his way in 2 out of the 3 cases. I'm joined now